As far as ACS is concerned, just tell us about what is their business model? What are they set up to do?
ACS is a professional fundraising organization. Charities typically will reach out and ask us for support and guidance in allowing them to more easily contact and acquire new donors, as well as continue to engage the donors that they already have. It basically creates brand and name recognition.
So essentially, what you guys offer is a way to reach a lot of people across the country, raise a lot of money, and in exchange, or the way you guys get paid, is that you keep a good amount of it, and they get the rest. Is that an overly simple way to explain what you do?
It's simple and it's fairly accurate, but we keep the money to cover the costs because we assume 100% of the costs, which is why newer and smaller organizations or large organizations that are looking to diversify the means by which they raise money would engage with a professional fundraiser. There's no cost on their part, and it allows them to move forward in acquiring new donors without a vast investment in resources they may not have. So all of the cost is assumed by the professional fundraiser, in this case ACS, and in return we will keep a very small percentage of the actual profit after costs, and the charity gets the vast majority of the profit.
And generally, what is your profit margin?
Our profit margin is typically in the neighborhood of 15 to 25% of actual dollars that become profit after expenses. Our profit margin as an organization is substantially less when you're looking at all of the money invested in expenses.
And last year, did you make or lose money as ACS?
2012 ACS unfortunately did not break even. We were a little short of reaching level.
And had you been making money prior to that, or has this been a trend?
The last 2 years it has been a slight downward trend. Prior to that, the company was making money, but as the economy turned down, it became a little bit more challenging to raise money. It's also more challenging when there are much more visible causes to give dollars to. So when you have very unfortunate events, whether it be Katrina, the spill in the Gulf, the issues in Japan, people tend to pay attention to something that gets more publicity. So it's been a little bit more challenging.
As you know, the industry that you're in is not always real popular. Before we get into those issues, what would you say are the biggest misconceptions about not just ACS, but professional fundraisers in general?
I think the conception, and it is definitely stated on message boards and in articles, is that companies like ours profit on the backs and names of charities and mislead individuals as to where the dollars go. And that is absolutely untrue. All charities spend more than they earn when they're in an acquisition mode. It typically costs $1 to $1.50 to get $1 when you're acquiring new donors. So right out of the gate, I would say that that's the largest misconception, is that we're getting rich and the charity gets no money. It's absolutely untrue. I would say the second misconception is that charities can do the job themselves and do it better and at a lower cost. That's also not true unless it is a very large household name. Most charities don't have the means and the resources to purchase paper, postage, phone lines, and all of the other necessary items that allow them to engage with a potential new donor. We have years of expertise and we have the ability to leverage those costs across several dozen charities. And then finally, I guess I would say it's unfortunate, but the average person has the sense that they're better off giving money to an organization that they recognize because they feel more comfortable with it. And I think that that's really sad, because there are hundreds of charities that do incredibly good works that you or I may never have heard about or what their focus is.
Ken Berger, I suspect, is somebody that you are familiar with, but if you're not, he works for Charity Navigator, which I know is not always a big fan of organizations like yours. Here's what he said about this industry. These hucksters, these rip-off artists, these scammers, they're like vultures that try to exploit the public's generosity. To that, what do you say?
I would say that I think we have a very positive reputation among the charity organizations that we work for and the community in general. I think that his point of view assumes that an individual is better off giving money to an organization with whom they're already familiar. And if that were the case, so many very good charities would cease to exist and be able to do their good works. Without the assistance of organizations like ours, dozens, if not hundreds of charities would fail to be able to serve the individuals that they assist every year. And I think it's sad that they believe because someone has sought help and assistance and professional guidance that we then are a huckster.
What is the most, I think I remember this, but I want to make sure I got it right. What is the most that ACS keeps for a charity that it raises? What is the highest level that they retain?
ACS, for the actual professional fundraising, would probably keep in the neighborhood of 50 to 55% at the very top end, and that is almost all to cover actual real expenses for the people that are working on the phones, the actual cost of the phone lines, the equipment that places the calls, and then you've got another percentage that's set aside to cover the cost of actually printing the materials, mailing the materials, and processing the donations.
So grand total, when you add those two up, what is the highest?
It would probably be about 80%, and that sounds like an awfully high number, but if you actually look across the industry as a whole, when you're in an acquisition mode, reaching out to new individuals, that is very consistent, not just for us as a professional fundraiser, for most organizations when they're attempting to reach a new individual. That's why organizations set those numbers at such a consistent level and at such a narrow range, because those are real dollars. And if it was easier to motivate an individual like you or I, Ross, to give to an organization that you're just learning about for the first time, those costs would likely reduce, but not everyone has a household name.
To your point about new charities starting out and how difficult it is to raise money, there are a lot of charities that have existed for obviously many years that have gotten very good at raising money for the same kinds of causes that you guys raise money for cancer victims, for veterans, for the homeless. If I'm a donor and I get a call from you and I find out that 20, 30, 40 cents of what I donate will actually go to help somebody per dollar, and I know that another organization has a much higher rate for doing the same kinds of services, why in the world would I donate to a company, to a charity that ACS represents?
I can give you a handful of reasons. I think the first reason is that not every organization that appears similar is actually supporting the same types of programs. So you could have two organizations that focus on breast cancer, but one might focus largely on research, which is certainly a worthy and fantastic cause. A second organization may focus on supporting people that are going through treatment. A third may focus on direct assistance to families that may have unfortunately lost someone or are in the process of losing a loved one. That doesn't mean that any one of those three organizations is better than the other. It's what might motivate you or me personally. Another reason is that a larger organization whose costs may appear to send dollars through at a higher rate actually may turn around and pump more of that capital into larger and broader marketing campaigns or other mechanisms of doing what they deem is their mission and good work. So while on their annual reports it says that they've spent less dollars on fundraising, they're able, because they haven't used a professional fundraiser, to actually categorize those dollars as something that appears more wholesome and genuine.
But if I'm a donor, isn't my biggest concern that my money is going to help the people that I want to help, not that it's going to go to pay some overhead expenses to a bill collector or a fundraiser or a salary? Isn't my biggest concern that it's going to help that cancer victim more than it would elsewhere?
I would hope your biggest concern is it's going to the cause you feel most passionate about. But that said, the larger organization purports, and in some cases it's true, to put more of those dollars in that direction. And what I'm saying is that because they're allowed to report their revenue and expenditures differently, it's not always true that more of the dollar is going there. Certainly it's true for specific campaigns for many organizations. But as I said, if this organization is giving dollars to research and this organization is giving it directly to the patients and their families, you may find that a newer, smaller organization is working much more closely with the people they're assisting, or in fact doing a better job with a smaller amount of revenue to get assistance to the people you're hoping you assist.
So is it your belief that a lot of these charities, like the American Cancer Society or the V Foundation, just to pick a few cancer ones, that
Sure.
report much higher amounts going to program services, they might not be as high as they say they are?
I would say that that's possible. I certainly don't want to attack any of those organizations, and I personally raise money for more than one organization, and I believe that they do very, very good work. But I don't think everything is transparent the way it's represented to be. I would also say that those organizations, once upon a time, had to invest more of the dollars they raised into gaining traction and becoming a recognizable name, and now they're in a better and more comfortable place. And all of these other organizations deserve the exact same opportunity. And I don't think it's fair or reasonable to presume that a newer or smaller charity isn't as worthy of time or attention because they don't possess the resources to raise money as easily as perhaps Salvation Army at the holidays standing outside a department store.